Thank you for joining me. I'm Krystal Marazzi, the she-wolf of all streets, and welcome to my den, where we are discussing all things adulting and lessons I've learned from the streets.
The Untamed Psyche podcast is fueled by Maserati Solutions Incorporated, bringing solutions to the community.
Are you ready? Sorry. Did you get your hair together?
It's not together.
Never mind, it's not either. It's just it's one of the bothering.
Well, it's because I'm seeing it backwards and it's bugging me.
Yeah. Welcome back to the Untamed Psyche podcast. We are all here. We've got Patricia as usual. So she's a staple now in our podcast. And we have Victoria Pontell. Did I pronounce that correct, Victoria?
Yes.
Okay, perfect. Victoria Pontell, she is a Ph.D. in nursing education and a Christian author on 7 Keys to Unlocking Radiant Beauty. So tell us a little bit, Victoria, about your book. So let's jump into that.
Sure. So thank you, Chris and Patricia, for having me, and hello to your listeners today. It's really a privilege to be here. Really appreciate it. So the book, 7 Keys to Unlocking Your Radiant Beauty, published last year, and it's a book that I had wanted to write for quite a while. I think I was writing it in my mind for a while, and it was just lessons I learned about my physical body. There were a lot of struggles in my journey about my body and just not liking my body and kind of rejecting myself, and learning that was not, the best place to live, and how to come free of that. And so I wanted to write some lessons for my daughter, actually. And so that was kind of the motivation initially, to give her some nuggets of how to deal with some of the pressures out there in society, especially for women, that we go through. And so wanted her to have that. Then I just felt that, maybe this message would be for a broader community, that other women could be helped. Statistics show that 79 to 80% of women are dissatisfied with some part of their body. That's who are saying something, right? And
Satisfied with about 70 to 80% of my body.
right. And so it's just like, so it's kind of like, how can we start talking about this and giving people kind of the freedom to get rid of shame and to really enjoy living in their body. So that was the hope. And so in the book, they're setting kind of 7 areas that often, get attacked, especially. So kind of went into that.
What are the 7 areas, or is that like the giveaway?
Oh, no.
Is that like a spoiler alert?
No, totally. Yeah. So one is, how we think about ourselves and what we say about ourselves. That's a big one. And then what we're putting into our body. So that could range from, food, drinks, other substances, pharmaceuticals, kind of how to navigate that with all the choices. And then exercise and rest, like finding that rhythm of, pushing our body in times, but also finding that rest pattern and finding comfort in whatever that is for you. Media influences, like how to kind of consider social media and its influences on you, so that it's not, you don't leave social media and feel like crap because you don't measure up, but you feel empowered and you're like, oh yeah, maybe you did say somebody, who looks pretty, but not to let that bring you down, but say, wow, I really liked how they did their hair or something like that, and being okay with that, but coming out of this cycle of competition and just never being good enough kind of thing. So really how to look at social media in a healthy way. Yeah. And then another area was what we do to our body, because we have a lot of people around us judging what we should or shouldn't do. And so the whole aesthetics world is blown up, and like all of these things to navigate. And so really, finding again what's right for you, and not, needing to people please and things like that. So kind of just navigating that part of what's going on in the world. And then there's a one on sexual purity, just from lessons that I learned that I wish I would have learned sooner in my life. And so I think that speaking into that for people, just to be protective in their relationships. So yeah,
I think those are big. That I struggle when going on vacation, and I'm just like, man, because I put on a lot of weight because some medical issues that I had, and it was just it's just hard to get out of that rut. And then you see other people, they're going on vacation and they look great in their bikinis, and they're like, I'm 50 and I look amazing. And I'm like, well, I'm not 50 and I don't really, I think it's very difficult because it's shoved in our faces more than when we were young. And you had to pick up a magazine to see that. And now or watch TV, but now it's literally in your face 24 hours a day. And we spend way too much time on our phones. So, I mean, if you sleep 4 hours a day, it's in your face 20, So
She only sleeps 4 hours a day.
well, that's whatever. I do, but we don't need to get into that because I don't need a lecture.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, and I think that's the beautiful thing is like owning you. You know what I mean? Because like, whatever that is, and like just saying, yeah, this is me. this is how I go. You know what I mean? And I think that's the freedom that is something to really go after. I like to take a walk every morning because it's a way that I anchor in the morning just to kind of set the tone for the day. Maybe people think that like I'm the only one out sometimes walking, like a couple neighbors with their dogs or something, but maybe I'm kind of an oddball because I'm out doing my morning walk because it's not the majority. Maybe they're in the gym, I don't know. But it's okay with that. Like I'm like, no, I don't need a population to do the same as me because I know for me, I need this, you know what I mean? And so I protect that time. Like even if my husband and I are traveling, I'm like, hey, can we do a later flight? Because I know that this is how, for me and my body and just my kind of setting the tone for the day, it's helpful for me to get this in. And then I feel then the other parts of the day, not that I have to be rigid about it. And if I have to miss it, it's like, okay, well, I miss it and it's something I enjoy and that's okay. You know what I mean? So I think there's just this freedom of expressing who we are that is such a beautiful thing.
Well, and all of our bodies work differently. They're all mechanically made differently. Like she was talking about, I only sleep 4 hours a day. And I'm like, I don't want to lecture because I get tired of hearing it. You're not going to lose weight if you don't get 8 hours of sleep, blah, blah. But I've put on weight because I've been sleeping more. And I don't feel good when I sleep 8 hours a day. I wake up and I'm groggy. I don't feel motivated. I don't. But if I sleep 4 hours, sometimes it's even less, and if I do sleep 8 hours a day straight for 5 days, I'm up for 2 days. Like I don't go to sleep and my body is just not geared that way. And does that mean that I'm going to have long-term effects? Possibly. But right now I could get in a car wreck tomorrow, right? I don't know what the future holds and what all of that is, but I know how my body reacts currently in its state. And if 4 hours is what I need to do, then that's what I need to do. And it's the same thing, some people need to eat more carbs and some people need to eat less carbs, right? And it's just everybody's body is made differently.
So true.
Yeah. And I think that's huge to hone into what works for your body. So.
Exactly. No, exactly. Yeah.
So what was the purpose of writing that book? I know you said you said you originally started for your daughter, right? And how old is she now?
She's 25 now.
Okay. Yeah. And how old was she when you wrote this?
I would say she was probably when I started maybe 22, 23 and then went through, and then went through the, the publishing process. But she's younger generation and, she's, I think, like you said, like, I think there's definitely different approach things coming at the younger generation that maybe we didn't have in the same way for sure, like with social media and such. And so just navigating some of those things, and her voice has been really helpful for me too, because then I kind of understand, okay, what is she navigating in her life and what are the challenges and like she looking at things and stuff. And so that's been really helpful for me.
And I love that you said that because actually one of the reasons that I started the podcast was not only just to let people know that like even if you've been through those things and you've had these trials and errors, you can move forward in a positive way. But on top of that, my father passed when I was young, when I was 6. And I have like one cassette tape, which you can't even play cassette tape anymore, but I have one cassette tape with his voice on it. And I was like, if I die tomorrow, I'm sitting here giving these kids advice, but they're not listening to me. One's 16 and the other one's, 23, and he's just now getting to where he listens. But if I have this podcast where they come back and listen to my voice, I advise, and the same thing with your book, right? She may not be ready to receive that now, which she might be, but she may not be. But she may be in her 40s, and who knows if you're going to be around in that moment. And then she can rely back, and it's almost like you're able to talk to her. So I think that's really, really good. Yeah.
Yeah, I love that, because I feel like able to impart, you know, to the younger generation, like some of the things we've learned. And you're right, like it's the timing, but it's very precious when it is there, you know, at that moment that it meets them. You know what I mean? And like you said, you may not, you know, you may like be telling it now, but when that moment comes, it has the impact that it was exactly meant to have.
I love that. Sometimes I'll listen, like, so it just, sometimes it's just editing. So a couple weeks after, and I'm editing and I'm listening to the podcast, I'm like, this was meant for right now, but I recorded it 2 weeks ago. That's weird. I needed that message right now. I've even sent it to her before, and I'm like, well, you know, she's going through something or whatever. And I'm like, well, from your own mouth, this is what you said 2 weeks ago. And I'll clip it and send it to her.
Love that.
Why don't you listen to yourself?
Yeah.
Yeah. So tell me a little bit about your personal story and how you got to where you are, why you got into nursing, and then you stepped away from that as well, correct?
Yes. Yeah, so just kind of the background story about me. So I grew up in a small town, grew up in a Christian family. In terms of body, taught, don't focus on your body, it's your heart that's most important, kind of thing. And which is true. Or what happened is when I got to adolescence, not only, you know, is the world shouting at you that your body's important, but it's going to be hugely impactful what kind of friend you're going to have, you know, whether somebody's going to be interested in you, opportunities are going to be there. And I think for me, like, I wasn't really equipped with what to do with that. And I think I kind of leaned on, well, then you need to make people happy. You know, isn't that what love is? You know, kind of the people pleasing route. And so what ended up happening is, in an effort to try to please people, it's like, okay, well, my body's changing. I was in adolescence, and you know, that time when hormones are coming and you're like, oh, my body's changing. Like, and so my friends and I went on crash little diet thing, and I took it to an extreme. And what ended up happening is I lost weight. But then I needed to stop losing weight. And it kind of started me down this path where food became something that it felt like I could control when other things were out of control in my life. And it was kind of getting in those cycles of not eating too much. And it was just starting to really destroy my life, honestly, and just putting me in these mental spins. And it was like, okay, I'll start again Monday. Monday would come, and, you know, by Wednesday, I'm blowing, you know, this perfect plan that I have for myself. And then, you know, a lot of times with food issues, exercise distortions come in. And so I went that road too, and, you know, kind of trying to over exercise and things. And so I was tired and kind of going through that in my teens, trying to navigate all of that, still showing up for high school and all of that, you know what I mean? And so then, I think what ended up happening for me is I ended up getting in some help, and I started to find, you know, some discipline, self-discipline, and like help with that. But what I realized is that, well, things got quieted. I was still pretty restrictive of myself, and like pretty hard on myself, to be honest with you. And it wasn't until I was almost 40 that I realized that I was still in a lot of like rules for myself that I needed to broke free from. And so, but because I had found discipline, you know, probably around 18 or 19, it allowed me to go to school, you know, because I was able to stay in my my rules for myself, right? Which was good, because otherwise it was flat out chaos. And so I ended up going to school, becoming a nurse. You know, I always thought I was going to be a teacher. When I grew up, I, you know, thought that's what I was going to be. And so it was fun to see how after I finished nursing, I gravitated back to education. Yeah, so it was in nursing education, working with a lot of women. You know, nursing is still predominantly women, you know, helping them, you know, achieve their goals. And then probably, like I said, when I was closer to 40, my life was just kind of starting to become not good. Like just, I was hitting walls and I was kind of, where they say those low points. I think I hit a low point because again, I was in these, rigidities for myself. My marriage was falling apart. And then I just felt like just so disconnected with me because I had gotten so far away from what was best for me. That's when I kind of hit my low point and was like, okay, I need to get out of this. I need help. And that's when my life started turning around and I, then I started realizing that I called out to God because I was in a mess spiritually, and then was, on a journey then back toward getting healing. And so that's kind of how that went. But it was amazing how even though all that crazy stuff was going on, I was able to accomplish things and still be able to work and do things.
Sure. So did you, when you said, when you're in your 40s, you realized that things kind of were falling apart, was that because you let go of the control, like as you were holding on to it too tightly?
Yeah, I think maybe it was too tightly.
Okay.
There's a saying that you think something's in control when it's really out of control. You know what I mean? And that was kind of where I'd become like, my weight. I was underweight and, different things and just these cycles that I had put myself on needed to shift.
Had you stepped into like anorexia, like that realm, or?
I don't think anyone would say that nobody would probably look at me and know, you know what I mean? Because again, the lens of other people, but I don't think I was underweight for what I should be. I can tell you that. And, but then it was more just inner kind of stuff going on. And plus I had gotten into yoga, which, is a lot of people do yoga. But what happened for me is I had started going to a bookstore study and I didn't realize the spirit realm that I was kind of entering into. So I started having, dreams and other things that were really scary for me. And so I realized I had stepped out of safe boundaries. That happened for me too, which is probably what called me quickest back to getting some help,
Mm-hmm. Yeah. I found that a lot of times when we let go of our routines, and that's why I was asking, because sometimes when you let go of the routine, because people are like, oh, live freely, like don't be so rigid and don't be so strict, then we lose control and it turns to chaos. But then also, if you're holding on too tight, just like if, a screw, if you're tightening it too tight, it gets stripped, right? And then it just falls apart too. So there's a balance there, and finding that balance is sometimes it's complicated because you don't even realize it's happening and you're going and going and going, and then all of a sudden you've stripped the screw or you've let go because you're like, I don't want to live this super strict life, and my friend can just eat whatever she wants or do whatever she wants, right? And I want to be able to be free like that and be able to do those things. And then you just let go, and then all of a sudden you look up and you've gained 100 pounds, right? So I keep bringing it back to weight, but I think that's one of our biggest struggles. But it could be anything. It could be, tanning. It could be people that overbrush their teeth. I mean, literally anything can be an obsession.
And I feel like it's kind of can be a process sometimes because like what I noticed in my life was like I needed that discipline at first, like that really strict discipline of ordering my day and getting order in my life, you know what I mean? And so that really helped me. But then over time I realized, okay, like I think I was building trust back with myself. Like, no, I'm not this chaotic person anymore, And so then it was kind of like, okay, then I realized, through my journey, like, okay, I have an authority over this stuff. This stuff doesn't have an authority over me. I am making choices. And the truth is like, all things are possible, but not everything's beneficial and, going to build us up. And it's been like, I've gone on like little deals with coffees, right? Like, so it's like, okay, I'm not going to drink coffee, but then it's like, but I can have coffee and I don't have to feel shame about having a cup of coffee, you know what I mean? And so it's like, sometimes I'll take a break and see that I have the authority over it, But there's also where not having shame with having something either, too. You know, when I could have that and I don't need to feel guilty about it. But there's other things where it's like, okay, if I eat that, is that going to be best for me? And so it stops becoming about, you know, these rules of I can't have. It's like, yeah, I can have that, but is it going to make me feel good? And is it going to help me work towards the goals that I have for myself?
Right.
You know,
and so there's also the difference of temporary feeling good.
Yeah.
You know, that hit of dopamine versus long-term feel good, right? And it's knowing that difference between the two.
Exactly. And I think the switch flips when you realize, like, no, I'm making this choice for myself on what's best for me rather than some rule. Because it's like, you know, human nature is like, it's like I've heard, if you put a little child in a room full of toys and you're like, okay, you know, you can play with any toy in this room, but that one, they're like, I want to play with that one. You know what I mean? And so I feel like when we come back to saying, okay, no, I can do that, but is that going to be best for me? I think when we look at it from that lens and say, okay, no, I want to take best care of myself as possible, and these things help me. If I have that, then it's probably not going to make me feel good, and so therefore, you know, I'm making that choice. And I think that that cuts out the shame. It cuts out it's very empowering to live in that kind of mindset. Yeah.
It's also a struggle. I was talking to somebody, I was coaching somebody earlier today, and we were having this conversation that she was running into issues. Like, basically she outgrew her friends, and her friends are still wanting to go to the bars and drink and bar hop. And she's like, I just don't want to do that anymore. Yeah. And, you know, growth is painful because you may set boundaries and decide that that's not what you want to do. And just because it's different than what your friends, now you've grown apart, because that's all they want to do, right? And you don't have anything really like solid in common with these people, and you've been friends with them for so long, and they're off doing their thing, and their thing doesn't really align with your thing. Yeah. And can you go to the bars with them and drink? I mean, like, and not drink? Yeah, absolutely. But are they going to give you a hard time about that too? And to that, I say they weren't really good friends anyway, right? However, it's just difficult, right? Because sometimes to grow, you have to completely start over in your lifestyle. And that involves getting a whole new group of friends that you may or may not ever find. So. And
I do. Yeah, I think that's a really good point to kind of think about the influence of those people around us, and are they helping us grow into our best self or kind of pulling us back? And so I think that's really important, because friends are meant to help us be built up and to go into our highest potential. If you're moving into that next place and they're kind of not ready to do that, like, it's something to think about. Are they best around me now, you know? And especially when you're trying to make a change, like, I can tell you, like, anytime, you know, a lot of us are making changes, especially with food or drinks or something like that, you know, or smoking or something like that, you know, where it's like, you know, you hear about the white knuckle days, right? Where those first days where you're like, I want to stop this, you know what I mean? And those first days can be really vulnerable because, you know, the change to the body and the mind and everything. And so I definitely think when people are making changes to, you know, this, you know, putting supports around you and putting yourself in the environment where you can be successful for yourself is really important.
Definitely. So what kind of tools do you have in your tool belt that you could maybe tell our listeners or our watchers, hey, you know, what I've used when I've run into situations where I've tried to change my habits, or I have to walk away from some friendships or relationships? What kind of tools do you have to share?
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, I definitely had to separate myself from some people, not because they were bad people. It's just that there was an exercise group that I was with, and they were amping it up, like running, you know, more than marathons, like doing really ultras. And that's great for them. But it was not right for my body. And so I ended up having to separate myself from that because it was just fatiguing me and it wasn't best. And so I had to reset what I was doing, and they were doing triathlons and things. And again, it was just exhausting me, and my body is not designed for triathlons, to be honest with you. So
mine either. Don't worry.
So I was
I
just
am
like,
definitely not
I
even,
know, I have no idea what I was
I'm
doing
not
out
even
there,
designed
but
for a marathon.
Mine's like, it's
Of
time to
anything.
get up and walk around anymore.
I know, I'm like, oh, sure, I can do this. It's like, yeah, it was no. For fun, yes, but no. But
So I'm definitely
I
not
think-
doing it for fun.
yeah. But one
Not
thing
fun
that,
at all.
Nothing about that sounds fun.
yeah, no, I'm telling you, it's amazing what some people can do, honestly.
True.
But yeah, but one thing that, is an amazing reflection that I think, we could do is really ask ourselves if our body could talk, what would it say? And,
Bad words, I promise.
and it's interesting because when I, have thought about that, it's, some bodies are out there, and especially as a nurse and seeing people, it's like some people's bodies would say things like, yeah, my owner doesn't really pay attention to me, and they're 50 right now and they're taking care of me like they were 20, or they're not listening to me, they're not, I'm making signs and symptoms, but they're not responding to me, and they're overall, body's feeling neglected because the person is putting their brain ahead of the rest of the body, right? That, is more important or whatever. And just kind of body, you get dressed and you go and, you're not that important. Just come along with, the brain. A second characterization is where a body may feel like the owner just doesn't like it. Like it's never good enough. Would say, my owner doesn't like me. I'm not good enough. Can never measure up to other people. And I just feel pretty rejected by my owner.
Right.
And then a third characterization is kind of like a body where it feels like the owner is not protecting it, and like it's being put in situations. And sometimes in this characterization, the owner, is accepted by society, like, they're attractive or they're whatever, and so the owner thinks they're all that in a bag of chips, and then they put the body at risk, and in situations. And so the body's like, yeah, I kind of feel used by my owner. And when I step back and reflect on those three, kind of feeling the body feeling neglected, not liked, and then abused at times, that was me. Problem with that is that's left untended is like the body responds to that. The body can get tension, the body doesn't feel safe with the owner. Like, the tension. And it's like,
You
and
can't get rid of it.
yeah, and it's exactly, and just the mental torment and, it just takes us out of alignment. And so for me, it was kind of like, okay, no, I want my body to feel safe with me. I'm going to take care of it. I want it to relax, and I want it to know that I'm going to be working for its benefit. I think that's one important question. Like, if your body could talk, what would it say? And how could you help it?
Yeah.
Yeah.
So what do you feel like the difference when you were in the chaos and not listening to your body compared to now? Give a couple of examples of what you feel like is different.
Oh, yeah. I mean, just mentally, the peace, just the shift from feeling like, that kind of double-mindedness. Did I do it wrong? I should have done it this way. I shouldn't have had this. Should have done, like kind of to peace, just saying, yeah, no, I own that. I own that decision, and I can be at rest about that. Feeling confident in my decisions. I mean, the confidence returns where it's like, no, I don't have to be so confused. I can live from confidence. And so those were huge for me. And then I don't have the bopping of my weight or anything. You know what I mean? I found stability. I don't even really weigh myself anymore because I don't feel that need. But I mean, I do get weighed at the doctors or whatever, but it's not something that I measure as my indicator.
It's more about how you feel versus the number on a scale.
Yeah.
Were you weighing yourself all the time when you were going through?
Yeah. Because we know, especially as women, we know like water weight and different fluctuations that can happen. So it just, for me, I stopped doing that because it just,
every day.
I had to get rid of my scale because I got obsessed with it, like 1 or 2 pounds. So I think I got rid of my scale about, it's been less than 6 months ago.
Yeah.
I can't. because then I'll end up 300 pounds. So I have to weigh every day, or I will end up 300 pounds. It's just the way it works.
So whatever is, important for each one of us. But for me, it became necessary. It just became something to let go of for me. But yeah, I think again, it's back to, what works for you.
Sure.
Yeah.
Some people see it as a motivator, and some people it's an anchor that drowns them.
Yeah. Mine was, because then I still struggle. I struggle with not eating too much. Like I constantly go through the battle. And so, mine got to be where I was upset. I still struggle. With obsession. So I'm on the opposite. She eats healthy and still struggles with the weight loss, to where I may eat like crap and be too skinny, but then I can gain it really fast. And as soon as I start gaining it, then I just don't eat. So I'm kind of in the chaos level of right now in my life, probably and it's not something to really talk about. I struggle in my own brain, and that's why I had to get rid of my scale, but I still really struggle. I'm just not looking at a number every day. But then I do when I go to the doctor, and I would freak out. It's 3 to 5 pounds. But then I did have weight loss surgery, and that's been a really mental battle, more than what people understand. And I can put on, what's weird is I really can put on about 4 or 5 pounds, and I notice a huge difference in how I feel. But I don't tell people that, because people are like, 5 pounds. It was hard. It was interesting because I met somebody else that had weight loss surgery, and she brought it up about how like 5 to 7 pounds makes a huge difference in how because it affects how my stomach feels. But then I struggle mentally with feeling fat when I know I'm not fat, because I struggle finding clothes that even fit because I'm skinny. But the mental battle is so tough on me. And it's something I've been battling really bad for the last 2 months, because I go shopping and nothing fits because it's too big. And then I go through that, but then I feel like I weigh too much, or I feel like,
so 4 or 5 pounds can be like, for me, 4 or 5 pounds feels like it's a lot. Like, and I'm like, that's a whole I try to equate that to, I'm like, it's going to take me 2 weeks to lose what I just put on overnight. Like, I can change 10 pounds in a day. Like, it just in an hour, like, it'll just change 10 pounds. And I'm like, that's a lot. But then it could just come off too. Like, it could just disappear and reappear. So like, I have to give myself a 10-pound weight movement scale. But if I put on 4 or 5 pounds, like, I can feel it. I know I'm heavy, and I'm like, I feel so heavy right now. So when you were in that chaos, you mentioned finding yourself in a place to get help. Can you talk about that? Or
For sure. So for me, what ended up happening was, I turned to God. I believe in Jesus. And as I turned to God, like, I had grown up in a Christian family, but I had not realized or understood the relationship with the Holy Spirit. And what happened is, when I was in that down place, I started listening to different podcasts and, different authors and things, and was listening to a Christian author, and she was talking about how God had impressed on her heart something, and had basically talked to her. And I was like, what? You heard from God? Like, you heard from God. I want to hear from God. And I knew enough that God was no respecter of persons. So I started pursuing like that relationship with the Holy Spirit. And I was just in pursuit of that. And then eventually I did, start to hear the voice of God. And in God's word, his word says, my sheep know my voice. And once I realized that personal relationship with the Lord, it was a game changer. Because what ended up happening is I realized that what God was impressing on my heart is he wanted to take this burden of the weight. He saw the weight the heaviness and the burden that I was carrying about my body. And it's so interesting because when you think about it, like, just think about going to buy milk. There's so many choices of milk, right? Just one choice, and then bread, like, what's best for your body? Such a myriad of choices, and the complexity of choices is like, oh my gosh, it's so overwhelming. But when we come back to our creator, like, and that's one thing I feel like the complexity of life and all these decisions and choices at least started pointing me to the need for our creator, for God's help in these situations. And what ended up happening is that I started giving this over to God, and that I started being led. And Proverbs 3:5-6 became living verses for me, that, to trust in the Lord and don't lean on your own understanding, but to seek him and he would guide you in all things. And that became such a living verse for me, because I thought I had to do it all on my own. That's kind of what we're taught, self-sufficiency. And so, but as I started to turn it over, like, I realized that God was in the details in these decisions. And so what I started to do is I would pray over my meals, because there is a spiritual protection when you start doing that. And then I started just asking God, like, is this best for me or not? Like, what do you, and wait on him, and just come into that personal relationship. And that is like the most direct route that I could say to anybody to do. But for people who aren't walking, even in a faith walk, even checking in with your body and getting that somatic body awareness of, like, okay, this is, I had kind of lost touch with when I'm full. You know what I mean? I was just bypassed. Goodbye. I wasn't paying attention, or watching, doing whatever. And so really coming back into that body awareness of, okay, what is best here? And yeah, it's like you're saying, Patricia, it's like, if I'm having this, mental, like, beat up, right? Like, why? What is that saying to me? And then what is the truth? Neuroscientists say, like, 80% of our thoughts are bent towards negativity and 90% are repetitive. So to me, that's like, okay, what am I thinking? And do I need to get my mind renewed? Because if I'm beating myself up, that is not loving myself, right? Because I want to be gentle to myself and kind to myself and be loving to myself. And so replacing those thoughts is so important.
I think it's a big challenge to find that balance and of working on yourself and find that relationship with God, if you're open to that. For people that aren't religious, I say still a prayer, but whether you're praying to a God or you're just being grateful for the food that's in front of you and how it was prepared and the animals that died to get there, or the plants that were picked and the people that had to sacrifice their time with their family to pick that food for you, make sure it gets to the grocery store for you to buy it, and go through that whole process of gratitude and, wishing well upon your food and how it digests, and really thinking through all of those processes. It really does something to the mental state of how it works within your body. Taking time to taste it. That's another thing that I have found through research is, say, if you take time to really taste your food and not just, okay, well, that tasted good, it's salty, move on, right? The texture, the feeling, and be really cognitive of how that tastes on your tongue. Chew it for a long period of time. That will actually help with your digestion. And I think that's all a mental state and your mindset of how the food is digesting in your body, how it tastes, and not swallowing it in bigger pieces and things. There's a lot of different roads that leads to, but it ends up being better digestive for your body. I would implore anyone that is listening, or you don't have to, a lot of times when people hear God, they just turn off, that you can still do those same processes and call it something different. If that's the case, maybe it's not praying, but it's being mindful of what was given to you. Although obviously I am that praying over your food and your life and the life of other people. I think that's big, but I, am definitely big in the divine power, but also, I've had a lot of church trauma, and I know that there are people out there that are dealing with that. And so I just want to say that, like, you can still have these same rituals and movements and call it something different. So
Yeah, I think we have agreement that, like, I don't think anybody would have an agreement that they want to be their best selves, right? While we're here on life. I mean, we're all here for a period of time, and so I think, it's about coming into our best self and not letting shame and not letting guilt and living our lives in this unkindness towards ourselves, really, and being in freedom and finding that place of freedom, I think, is really something to go after for all of us. Because even back to the people pleasing, I mean, people pleasing comes with a cost, and the cost is losing self. And so it's really, a lot of people are kind of rebelling against, these rhythms or what they're supposed to be. They're like, yeah, no, I want to be me, and it may come off in another way, but it's like to be within the boundaries of the true self. But it's really about giving people space to find what's best for them in these different aspects. And it's just the body, a lot of times, even in the church, the body can be kind of minimized, and yet it's such an important player in life. And because it is carrying us in our life, right? And so how we're handling it, what we're doing, and it is part of what the society kind of is looking at first glance. And so it is important to talk about and to find that place of okay, what is going on, and then where do I need to move in my life for that freedom in these different spaces.
That's right. Yeah. I love that. I think we'll wrap up unless Patricia, you have anything else?
I don't. This has been extremely interesting. It's made me think a lot.
Yeah, good. I can see the smoke coming out of your ears.
I know, right?
We're gonna have you back on in our next episode. We'll talk about relationships. We can dig more into relationships with God and things like that. Hear a little bit more about yourself. We do like to try to end on a fun fact for our first episode. You got anything to give us? If not, that's okay too.
Well, I did run the Boston Marathon, which was
cool.
I had qualified in my first marathon, so I guess I was good enough to do that. But which was super cold.
Why don't we just talk about the negative self-talk? Good enough.
Yeah, it was I did that, but I mean, honestly, I ran, and it was a year where it was raining, freezing cold, and I'm like, why am I here? So, but I did accomplish that. So
I love that. That's great. That's cool. Yeah, not everybody gets to do that. So that's awesome. All right. Well, we're gonna have you back next time, and we really appreciate you. Thanks, everybody.
Thank you. Thank you so much.
Thank you for joining my pack. You will find more tips and tricks to surviving the streets of the journey on my personal and business pages listed in the show notes. Don't forget to dream big, love hard, never quit, and remember, if you find yourself searching for a bone, dig deep.